All right, well, I think we've got one more panelist who's going to join us here shortly, but we will begin. And my name is Kevin Westhoff, one of the pastors here at Farmington Lutheran Church, and thank you for being here tonight, and welcome to Loving Our Neighbor, an Evening for Understanding. And I want to welcome you who are gathered here in the sanctuary and folks who are going to experience this by viewing it later as well. As we approach this time together, first I want to thank our panel, and thank you for being here and being willing to be vulnerable enough and strong enough to share some of your story and your experiences. And please know that is truly a gift for all of us as we seek to grow in our understanding and our care for each other. I want to give thanks to Rachel Harmon, who really loves it when I point her out in public. But Rachel has been spearheading a lot of great efforts for us, and if it wasn't for you, this night wouldn't have all come together. And so thanks for you and for everyone's work in that. Also want to talk a little bit, and maybe I'm preaching to the choir in this, but about kind of our environment tonight that we want to create and live in. So I want to lift up the spirit of that title again, the call to love one another. That's our calling as followers of Jesus, to love and to care for each other. And as the scriptures tell us, love does what? It listens. Sometimes it makes a little bit of feedback available, right? That's part of it. We'll just name it. But love listens. It is slow to speak appropriately. It bears with each other. It does that hard work also of growing and better understanding what each other experiences and goes through. Love is also the hard work of being able to sit in some discomfort in order to create a better future for each other. And in our culture and in our church, one part of our story that I wish wasn't the case, but often there's different conversations have been shied away from or intentionally avoided because of their discomfort or seen as being too divisive. And so while maybe we avoided some short-term discomfort, one of the casualties of that approach is that wonderful folks, like the members of our panel and many others, have endured some very trying and challenging experiences, to say the least. That painful history gives us even more motivation for us to connect, to listen deeply, and to try to grow our understanding of what each other goes through. And so in that hopes that more understanding leads to action and leads to a better life experience that involves caring for each other and better reflects Jesus and his call for us to be neighbors who show compassion and love and care for each other. So tonight, we're pleased that we'll have a chance, if briefly, but to hear stories and experiences from our panelists. There will also be a time tonight for questions and responses. And all of that is to be given in the Spirit to hopefully deepen the conversation and to deepen our understanding. And like I said before, I'm probably preaching to the choir on this, but we want to have a very respectful listening and learning environment. So with that, here are some helpful ground rules. One, in our statements, we speak for ourselves. We speak in those I statements, and we avoid inflammatory statements. Second is that our sharing, when that happens, is not just a rebuttal, or is not a rebuttal of somebody else's sharing. And that in all that we do, in our listening, in our speaking, we embody that spirit of loving our neighbor and sincerely listening and acting to better understand each other. So as we do that, I ask for our moderator, Rachel Harmon, and for our Director of Diversity from FHS. I don't know if I got the right title there, Ron, for sure, but for Ron Williams to guide us and to direct us to whatever is needed to keep that kind of environment. So thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you for having that willingness and that vulnerability to share. And in it all, may we be blessed by growing in a deeper understanding that can help us all experience a better life. So thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Kevin. I'm Rachel Harmon, and I'm so excited that we're here and that we're able to record this and share this after this evening, because I know there were people who couldn't be here. As we were starting to plan sort of this new social justice ministry here, and we reached out to people to find out what issues they really felt were most important, the three top issues for us were racial justice, LGBTQ issues, and mental health awareness. And so tonight, our ministry decided that one of the best ways for us to move forward is to hear from people in our community who are parts of these groups and to hear what we can do for them so that we can make an impact immediately here in Farmington and then obviously, hopefully further. But we want to start here. And so I really want to thank you guys all for being here. We already have a fill-in. We had someone with a migraine this evening, so she wasn't able to come. So luckily we have a fill-in, but we have Ron Williams from the high school. He's diversity guy. I don't know what his title, sorry. Diversity guy. And Terry Eknes is a member of our church here. She's going to share, and her daughter made a video that we're going to share. And then Paul Landwehr is going to speak about health, mental health, and Christine Clemens is our youth ministry person. She's going to speak about her experience with mental health. And then we have two women from the high school as well. Lauren Brinkman doesn't have a name tag because she wasn't expecting to participate, so we really thank her for that. She is the school psychologist and is the GSA, do you guys call it Gay Straight Alliance still, or is it?
It's Gender Sexuality Alliance.
Gender Sexuality Alliance advisor. And then Allison Lalby is a social studies teacher. She teaches an AP psychology class and used to be the GSA advisor. So what the plan for this evening is, we're gonna give everybody 5 to 8 minutes. I'm gonna run a timer. Don't make me cut you off. 5 to 8 minutes to sort of share their story, because I think hearing people's personal stories is really the best way to understand others. So we'll have them share their story, and then after that we'll open it up if you have any questions, and if you don't, we do have some other questions that I'll pose to the panel, but we certainly want to open it up to you guys if you have any questions. So do you guys have any questions for me before we get started? Okay, thank you for coming. I'm going to stop talking. My husband is going to run the video. And then after we see the video, this is Maddie Young is Terry's daughter, and she was going to be on the panel, but we planned it on the same night as the band concert because I'm an excellent planner. And so she made a video to share, and then her mom will share some other things as well.
Hi guys, my name is Maddie Young. I am a sophomore at Farmington High School, and unfortunately I cannot be with you because of that reason. I'm kidding. I am currently at a band concert, and I play the French horn and the symphonic band. So a lot of people just asked, so I had to throw that in. But I am Indian American, so I'm half Indian, half white, and my mother, Teresa Agnes, is on the panel sitting in front of you guys. I don't know the layout, so hopefully I'm right. But, yes. So, I know there are questions set out for us, and I'm not positive on all of them, but I do know one of them is, how safe do you feel at church? And I'm going to assume, since I am one of, if not the only kid on the panel, you guys are going to want to know how safe I feel at school. How safe I feel at church. 8 out of 10 on a Sunday service, like a normal Sunday service, because we are like kind of isolated from each other, and like all the old ladies always say like, you're so beautiful, and it really makes me happy. But that really changes when we meet up for youth. Confirmation was really hard for me, and I would say like 2 out of 10 at best. And that is one of the reasons I have not gone to Coin, just because confirmation was so hard for me, because I would love to say and reassure you guys that like kids at our church don't say racist things, but that is not the case. And yeah, that makes me personally feel unsafe, and feeling unsafe like that has also led to school. School I feel 2 out of 10. It fluctuates obviously, but this year it's pretty solid. 2 out of 10, not the best. And it's not necessarily because I feel my safety is in danger. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna get like hate crimed physically. It's more, hey, this kid said a really racist comment to me a couple days ago or last year. And I personally don't feel comfortable and feel safe from the racist comments that might come towards me. So yeah, Mr. Williams, who is also sitting in front of you guys, has been one of my saviors for school, truly. And I'm not the only one. He has been a savior for so many kids, and he is truly the biggest angel and support system on this earth. But feeling unsafe in school, at church, everywhere has led to multiple mental health issues, like panic attacks. Sometimes I randomly get them at school for like no reason. And it has also led to my eating disorder, which obviously racism isn't the only reason for both of those things, but it has been a really big reason. So I hope that this was really insightful for you guys. I've already taken up about 3.5 minutes. And I hope to see you guys on the next panel. Bye.
I'm just going to point this over to me so I can go on and say that I was just really listening. First of all, let me thank everybody for having me. And let me give a little bit of background about myself first for those who don't know me. I know some people in the audience as well. As you can tell, my jargon or my dialect is not that of Minnesota. I'm from the state of Virginia. I was born in the South and raised in the South. From there, I went to college and then kind of didn't know where I was kind of going in that avenue. And so I decided to join the military. And so joining the military, I joined the United States Army first, did 4 years exemplary. And then I was still a little bit confused. And when I tried to go back into the Army, they said, well, look, it's going to be a little bit. It's going to be 30 days. I didn't want to wait 30 days. So the next office was the Navy. So I'm like, okay, I'll take this and try this. How fast can you put me back in? Well, we can put you in next week. Well, the rest is history. 16 years later, 28 countries, a plethora of experiences that I will always treasure, people who I didn't recognize or didn't look like me changed my point of view. So altogether, I put in about 22 years as military service exemplary. I served this country honorably. I have 5 good conduct medals, and I'm proud of that. At first, I wouldn't say anything about it, but I'm very proud because I served my country and I was willing to die for it as well. But I want you to hear me very closely. When I came back here after serving my country, was I treated fairly in the process? No. And so we'll get into those pieces later when we talk about these other things with the panel. But I want to go back to what she said there. At the high school, I do quite a few things in the realm of equity and inclusion, also do academics. But I hear what I call the undercurrent of the community, okay? And school is just a microcosm of the community. And so we have a plethora of students there that are disenfranchised, and mainly I'm talking about BIPOC. And when I say BIPOC, I'm talking about Black and Indigenous people of color. That's a new term that is used for people of color now. Every about 5 or 10 years, they change that jargon a little bit. But right now, it's BIPOC students. And the demographics in the local area, if you look at the 2010 census, you know, our minority numbers are increasing in the neighborhood. Let me backdate some things here real quickly. I've been in the community for 20 years. When I first came to the community, it was very different from what it is now. And in those years, I've seen the numbers of minority coming in increasing, okay? Which means the population in the schools or the school district is changing as well. My point is this, is that the community is a beautiful area to live in, but we have work to do, okay? And we'll talk about those issues as we move throughout the panels. Going back to Maddie, Maddie is one of my leaders in the diversity club at the high school. When I first started about 16 years ago in the district, there was, let me see, I think I had 5 students in the diversity club. Now, about 130. 130. And those are some very powerful voices in that club, including your daughter. She's a very proud young lady and a very outspoken young lady. And so as we, like I said, as we move through that, not to be long-winded because I can go, you know, I invite you to ask me any questions that you want. There's no questions really off limit. I work with the Dakota County Police Department, the sheriff of the county, him and I'm his vice chair on the committee. I work with the Farmington Police Department. I work with political groups and school groups. Quite a few hands in the cookie jars all over the place. So I've been doing equity work now for about 35, 40 years. You know, I did somewhat in the military and also worked at the VA hospital. So I'm well versed in the knowledge of what we're gonna embrace tonight. And I just welcome any comments as we move, like I said, through this panel here, okay? Any questions so far? I want to hear some good ones though, okay? Oh, yes, please. Mhm. Okay.
Okay. Hi, I'm Terry Eckness, and like we said, that was my daughter. She's in the band, so she's not going to be here, but I'm glad she got to make a video and kind of, she's been a great voice for diversity, inclusion. She's very, very, very passionate about that, and it's just makes me so proud. But I moved to Farmington when I was 6 years old. I was adopted into a white family when I was 4 months old. And when I was adopted, my parents were told that I was biracial, Indian, black, and white. But about 3 years ago, my parents got me an Ancestry DNA kit, and I found out that that was incorrect. So basically, my whole life has been a lie. I am actually 100% Indian. My parents, both of my biological parents were from Trinidad by way of India. So even though I don't have any African ancestors, I'm still super proud and very proud to consider myself a person with color. I don't call myself a person of color, I consider myself a person with color. When I first moved to Farmington, I was probably the only person here with color. When I went to school, I was the only kid in school that was any type of ethnicity. One day in elementary school, I was in between classes and I was passing somebody on the stairway and I was called the N-word, which like, I didn't know what to say. It just sort of stopped me in my tracks. I was like, what? No one had ever said anything like that to me before. And I never really told anybody about that. I just didn't know what to do with that information. So I guess I never really told anybody, but, you know, I just, you know, at that time, I just stayed silent, and now I think, you know, it's time to be more outspoken, to call people out for making a remark that maybe they don't know is racist or sounds racist or is offensive to me. And I'm really working on doing that. You know, with Maddie's help, just really trying to be more powerful with that. I want to stop biting my tongue and being able to be more outgoing. But as I was writing this, I was thinking to myself, what is the difference between prejudice and racism? So I kind of want to give you the definitions that I found. Prejudice is described as a preconceived notion or opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Racism is the belief that some races are more superior to others. I personally believe that racism starts with prejudice. I also think it's time we stop judging people because they are tall, short, thin, curvy, have straight hair, kinky hair, because of what they wear, how they smell, how they walk, talk, sit, stand, kneel, and by their race. Different is beautiful. And how horrible would it be if we all looked the same? Finally, I'd like to share that May 25th, 2020, the day George Floyd was murdered, was my 50th birthday. I wasn't upset that I couldn't celebrate because the world was in the midst of a pandemic. I was kind of thankful, actually. But the events that happened that day made me really sad, angry, and scared. Now that the spotlight has been put on racial injustice and racism, it's my hope that change is the outcome, and that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
My name is Paul Landwehr. I was born in St. Cloud. I'm the youngest of 9. I had pretty much a normal childhood, normal, as they say. I went to Stout I graduated in 1982. And when I graduated, I had a girlfriend that I wanted to marry. I graduated in teaching, so I wanted to always be a shop teacher, so I had my degree. And I just didn't want to move back home. Well, all 3 of those things collided, and I ended up back at home. So I started to do things that were not like under the norm, what most people would say. I was doing things that were making my parents really nervous. But I didn't think anything of it because it was basically my mind was telling me, go ahead and do it. So what happened was I was like spending a lot of money. I had taken from St. Cloud, I took a taxi cab to Duluth, which most people sitting here would go, no, that had to be a chunk of change. You really shouldn't have spent that much money. But to me, you rationalize everything out. Well, so what happened was my parents thought I was just having a lot of mood and personality changes. And I thought they were just like way off base. But they said to me, how about if you just go get checked out, you go to a doctor, and we'll just see if he says okay, it's okay. So I go see this doctor. His name was Dr. Wolf. So I'm sitting in Dr. Wolf's chair, and he was a psychiatrist, and he starts talking to me about things, and I see his name tag on his desk. It's just like this. It said Dr. Wolf. And so I sat in my chair, and I thought it was funny, because I think I'm pretty funny. I started to howl, and I said, like a wolf. And so that was about the end of the conversation. So what ended up happening, I got put into the hospital for a 72-hour hold, which means that I can't get out if I want to. So after I get hospitalized for a 72-hour hold, I end up being in St. Cloud Hospital for a short time. I left because I didn't want to be there, and then my folks didn't like that, so then they shipped me down to the cities. So now I'm in a town I don't even know anything about, and I'm locked up. There's 2 solid doors. You don't get out. Well, I was hospitalized for 9 months straight. Not like, nowadays you can't even get into there aren't enough beds in Minnesota to get in for psychiatric treatment. Well, I was taking up one for 9 months. Well, in that time, they diagnosed me, and I was diagnosed with manic depression. So if you don't know what manic depression is, when you're manic, you do things way up on the top. You don't have to sleep. Everything, you just fly. And it's awesome. I mean, it's better than street drugs. Although I've never done street drugs, I think it's better than street drugs. But then, all of a sudden, when you crash, your line that everybody is on is about here, and everybody goes like this through life if you're a quote-unquote normal person. But when you're manic, you go straight past that line, and you go right into the bottom. And you can't get out. And so, your depression just runs your life. You don't want to talk to people, you don't want to go to work, you don't want to do anything. And so, after being hospitalized for 9 months and figuring all of that stuff out, I was able to get out of the hospital, and then it was a long process back to, I first had to do volunteer work because the doctors wouldn't let me just go get a job, and I was under very tight watch by my doctor. And then after that, when I moved back to Farmington, what happened was that was in 84, so it was basically 84, 85. I met my wife in 88, who I'd actually dated in college. And so she thought I was kind of wild anyway, so that really didn't seem that outlandish. But when we got married, we had 2 kids. I got a job at the Farmington High School. I was teaching the shop there. And my manic started to take over just enough where I thought I was fine, but the principal, him and I didn't really see eye to eye. So then at the end of that year and a half, I did long-term subbing, then I got the job. They didn't renew my contract, which is really a nice way to say you just got fired, but they didn't renew my contract. So then I ended up in the hospital again, and that was for about somewhere around 6 weeks or something like that. But then I have a doctor who I've now had for 31 years, and it starts off, you see him all the time. It's like, you almost live at their clinic. But now I see my doctor about 3 times a year, and I see her for about 20 minutes. And that's about all you can get, because the insurance, the way they have it set up, it's just set up that way. But anyway, I take medication, I take it every day. I take it as faithfully as anybody could take anything. And what happens when you're manic, you have the synapse in your brain. The easiest way that a doctor explained it to me was that you have the synapse in the middle, and normal people, they shoot so many senders and they got so many receivers, and they're all just jiving and things are really good. When you're manic, you have so many that are sending information, you don't have enough receivers. And that's where your thinking kind of gets crossed. But when you think you've had your brain since you've been a kid, and it seems normal, then you really don't notice it. Other people notice it way faster than you do. And then when you're depressed, it's just the opposite. You aren't sending enough information over your synapse to make it worthwhile for the receivers to do anything, and you just become flat and depressed. So with that, you have to understand how you're going to handle your depression. And one of the biggest things that you have to be able to do, I think, is you have to be able to tell people. If you don't tell people that you have a depression, it is really, really tough. It's just really tough because you're trying to hold everything inside. Your job may be going bad, you might have trouble at home, you might have trouble with family, whatever. But then you got this animal inside of you just kind of churning in you all the time, but you won't tell anybody. And it's just really a really hard thing. So for me, what it is that along with inclusion and everything else that people talk about, is that more people have to admit that there is something wrong. And one of the biggest things is with suicide, it's really a tough thing. Now, usually when somebody dies of suicide, in the newspaper, they'll just say that they died suddenly at home, or they'll never say what it was, because the family's embarrassed. The way churches are, they're embarrassed. I mean, it's just the religious, it's just a terrible thing, and so everybody just kind of skirts over it. Well, I've gone to 2 funerals of my friends' kids in their 20s. And one of the pastors said, it's not anybody's fault if they just look at it as an illness. He said, it's a heart attack of the brain. And if you think of it that way, it is. And so what you have to really understand is that nobody wants to be in that situation. And so with suicide, it has to be talked about more. It can't be swept under the carpet. That child just died, let's move on. In the last week and a half, my mother-in-law is 88. Her best friend, 76, just died from suicide. Last night, my wife gets a call from one of our friends. Her older sister, who's in her 70s, died from suicide. So it's not just young, it's not middle, it's everybody. It can happen at any time. And when I was suicidal, I was going to take my car and plow into a bridge because I thought it would look like an accident, it would be okay. And when I thought of it, I didn't care about, I thought my parents would be better off without me, everybody would be better off without me. And what was really ironic, what stopped me, is that I still owed my dad money for that car. I couldn't even see that my life was worth the money I owed him for that car. And that's the only reason I didn't do it. So there's a lot of help that needs to be done, but we really need help to let people know it's okay to say if you're hurting. And when you say to somebody, hey, how you doing? It's not just, oh, how you doing? Well, the Vikings suck. You know, that's not what we really need to know. What we really need to know is, hey, how are you feeling? Because times are tough. And when you're hurting inside, you really need to let other people know. And just listen. You don't have to have answers. Just listen. So this friend of mine, that they had their son who died of suicide, he has gone all in. He's on the National Board of NAMI, which is a National Association of Mental Illness. Last year, they passed legislation that next July, that there is going to be a new suicide hotline, and the number is going to be 988. So instead of trying to dial a 10-digit number when people are all panicky, you'll be able to actually call and somebody will answer the line for just suicide. And that's the kind of steps we need to take to keep going on this. So everybody knows that our veterans are in the terrible throes of suicide. I know you can't say everything's an epidemic, but it is so serious because it can happen to anybody. And it'll happen You'll think about a long time. I thought about a long time. But the thing is, if you act on it, that's the time. And people just won't know. And everybody goes, oh, I never knew. Gee, I wish I could have. Just talk to people. That's really what people need to do, is start listening and just being compassionate and saying, you know, what can I do? So, that's it.
That's very brave to share, thank you. I'm Christine Clemens. I've been in youth ministry for about 18, 19 years. I've had sat at many tables where lives have gone too soon. And since I started working here in Farmington a little over 2 years ago, I've been involved with some community members and stuff surrounding what we've started as the Farmington Mental Health Alliance group. And we continue to meet and to try to form and raise awareness of mental health and what it is and education around it. There's over 200 different mental illnesses. There's a lot of common diagnosis: depression, anxiety, ADHD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, obsessive-compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, social anxiety disorder. And a mental illness is a condition that affects person's thinking, feeling, behaviors, and moods. They can cause conditions, deeply impact our day-to-day lives as far as ability to relate to others, ability to be in a room with people. And mental health conditions are far more common than you think. Actually, 1 in 4 or 5 people will live with a mental illness within their life. It's as common as how many people drive a white or a silver car or vehicle. Post-pandemic, or with the pandemic, mental health has really has quadrupled in young people, ages 13 to 18. Suicide has become the second leading cause of death for students ages 13 to 18. And so I am alongside of you of the importance of reducing the stigma, providing education, and for providing support for people that are living with mental illness. I have lived with different forms of mental illness in my life. Small bouts of depression, but major bouts of anxiety and panic. In 2005, it was a beautiful Friday day, and I was driving down to Iowa with my mother to visit my nephew, who was like 2 or 3 at the time, and my sister. And we were driving, and we were going down 35, and my mom had a form of, she was early diagnosed then with a form of frontal temporal lobe dementia. And she had had some different spells of not feeling well. She'd get like a taste in her mouth sometimes, and you know, we'd bring her to the doctor or whatever, and not get a lot of outcome. And so we were driving this beautiful day, and I looked over, we were just going through Faribault, and she looked at me funny, and I said, are you okay? And she said, no, I don't think I am. And within the time that she finished that sentence to the point that I could pull over, she was completely out. And I was convinced she had died. And, but within about 30 seconds or so, I was able to get her awake, and we pulled off the road and eventually got back to the cities, got her to the hospital. They sent us away saying, you know, everything's fine, she probably didn't eat enough, whatever. And about a month later, the same thing happened again, to the point that we got her to a different hospital. Within the time that we were in the hospital, she had another episode of this, to the point that they were able to admit her and find out that there was something wrong with her heart that was causing her heart to stop and flatline. So they put a pacemaker in. And a part of the story that I missed is that within like the 6 months, we had brought her to all sorts of different doctors and stuff, and everybody said she was fine, fine, fine. And then come to find out that as she was on this monitor, that she was flatlining when she was having these episodes. So she was able to get a pacemaker, and she was doing fine. So that following summer, I was a brand new youth director, had no idea that you were supposed to set boundaries and not work all the time, and we had mission trip and camp, and I remember it got to the point where I was leading a trip in Minneapolis, and I just got really sick, like with a really bad cold. I was so bad that I was like in bed and didn't eat, didn't drink anything, and I got up one morning and was not feeling well, and I was trying to get into the kitchen to get a granola bar or something, and at that point I just fell onto the ground, and I didn't pass out, but I felt like I was going to, and so I crawled, and my roommate got me to the hospital, and as I got to the hospital, you know, they checked everything out. They said, oh, you know, your blood pressure's a little low, you probably need to eat a little more, you know, don't get up so fast, all these different things, and sent me home. I went home, and my parents were divorced, and I stayed at my dad's house that night, and as I was going to sleep, you know how sometimes when you sleep, you like jolt and you wake up, and I had jolted and wake up, and made my heart beat so fast that it just like totally scared me. And so for the next, like, it's funny now, but it wasn't at the time, for the next like 8 hours, I kept trying to go to sleep, but I couldn't because this panic and this fear was rising in me so much, to the point that I think I was 26 years old, and I ended up sharing a bed with my dad and my stepmom to try to feel safe. And we ended up in the emergency room late that morning to have medicine that calmed me down. But for the next about 6 weeks, I had severe insomnia and was fearful every time I go to sleep because I was afraid something bad was going to happen. And I went to doctor after doctor because I was convinced that, you know, they didn't diagnose my mom, so for sure there was something wrong with me. And that's one thing that mental illness does, is our brain is a very powerful tool. It's probably one of our most powerful tools. And when you're living with anxiety, when you're living with depression, it's actually, you can take on physical symptoms that can make you feel like you're having a heart attack. It can make you feel like a lot of those similar symptoms. And it's important to know that, because when you don't know that, you can feel like you're having a heart attack or you're having a stroke, and it's important to get those feelings checked out as well, but to know that our body takes on physical symptoms as well when we're living with anxiety and panic. And my anxiety got so severe that I had hives across my stomach, and it got to the point where I had seen a cardiologist, I'd seen a neurologist. I was just convinced that something was going to be wrong. And what happened is I went back to my old family doctor, who I hadn't seen in several years, and he sat down with me. He listened to everything I had to say as far as symptoms. He did a full physical and diagnosed me with acute anxiety disorder at the time. And, you know, within a few months with medicine and finding a therapist, I was really able to live life normal again, quote unquote normal. Sleep with the lights off. I mean, it sounds so silly, but it just was so much fear. There was one night I ended up, 2 of my friends had let me come over and just stay at their house so that I could feel safe, and, you know, we prayed together and all these different things. And so it's important for me to know, some important things to know when someone is sharing about mental illness, or not even just mental illness, but in conversations with people, is that there's language around mental health. It's not like a cold. It's not something you pick up from someone on the playground. It's something you live with. So I live with anxiety, and I've lived with an eating disorder. And so it's something you live with. And if you think about, if you have a friend that's diagnosed with cancer, what are things you do? You probably pray for them, bring them a meal, send them a card, call and check up on them. And it should be the same around mental illness, to care for And it can be hard sometimes because we get scared, but we gotta come alongside and be there for each other because each person matters and lives all matter. And so when someone is brave enough to share about their mental illness, the first thing to do is really to thank them for being brave, to be the best listener that you can be. Sometimes it's easy to just want to jump right in and interrupt, but waiting for the person to finish talking and having our distractions put away, like cell phones and different things like that. If someone is sharing openly about what I just shared and all of a sudden you're out on your phone and you're texting, I'm gonna immediately feel cut off and that I don't matter. Other important things to say are thanking you people for their bravery, offering help, offering to talk and listen more. I'm sorry to hear that, that must be tough. I'm here for you when you need me. Can I drive you to an appointment? Can we pray together? And the last one I think is really important, that to be reminded that we're safe and that we're in safe company and that you'll be able to be protected. What I get really passionate about is what not to say. And so I'll just say some of these. You know, it could be worse. Everyone's dealing with that same thing. We've all been there. The one that really gets me, if it makes you feel better, pull yourself together, what's wrong with you, and try happy thoughts. And that will immediately shut a person down that is openly sharing with you about what's going on. And I've even presented those things before to people, and we'll be in a conversation later and I'll catch it. I mean, it's hard to sometimes change our language, but it's important. And then the last thing is just different resources for help. I do have the long number on there that you can text for National Suicide Prevention Line. There's a national text line. NAMI, who's the National Association for Mental Health, they have tons of resources. I've been through a couple of their training of walking alongside of families. And when you walked in, I had a green and a pink card you were welcome to take with you. It has signs of mental illness as well as signs of suicide and what to look for in people and how to, those numbers and stuff are on there as well for help. So, thanks for listening. Oh, one other thing, just real quick. I think I skipped the slide, but there is help. And there is, you know, when I've had those moments where I'm so fearful and I'm like laying in a bed in a fetal position, Jesus says that he came that we would have life and live it to the fullest. And to me, that's not how God wanted me to live. And as I've talked with students and different things over my years in ministry, is that there is hope and there is help past what were those times that we're living. And there's help through medicine, there's help through our faith, there's help through counseling, exercise, taking care of our bodies, coping skills, all those different things. And for each person, it's a little bit different. But there is hope and there is help, and I would help whatever I can, and I know that as a community we want to do that as well. It's not the way we're meant to live, and that is like that. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Brinkman. I did not know I was going to be on this panel until I got here today. So I don't have any prepped notes with me, but in a weird way, I absolutely think that that's for the best, because then I can just look at you guys and more so speak from the heart and not really worry about exactly what I'm going to say. I'm the school psychologist at Farmington High School, and I'm also the advisor for our Gender Sexuality Alliance group of kids. I've been at Farmington 3 years now. I live in Burnsville with my husband, and so I'm still getting to know the area and the awesome community that's around. I am super proud to work at Farmington High School because of the staff and students that are there. Being a school psychologist, I get to work with students in special education specifically, and I get to work with a lot of mental health concerns. I just became the Gender Sexuality Alliance Advisor 2 years ago when Ms. Lalby passed that down to me. And this particular group of students, Gender Sexuality Alliance Group, it's for students in the LGBTQ community, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community. And any of their allies are welcome in this group as well. And so for this group of kids, what we do is we just provide a safe space at the high school for kids to be able to come as they are and who they are. And they get to interact with peers that are going through similar things. They get to see staff members come and show their support for these students, and it's just a really special place. As I speak, I'm like trying to speak for my kids, but I want it to be their voices. So as I talk, I'm trying to think of all the things that my beautiful students have told me, because I want it to come from them, whatever I have to say. This particular group of students that I know at my high school represent all things unconditional love, super supportive students, always seeking justice, always seeking to stand up for their peers, always seeking to educate themselves and others and to learn more. And that's a community that, like, essentially, in my mind, represents Jesus. Who is Jesus? He's someone who's unconditionally loves, someone who seeks justice, someone who always is a voice to those who feel voiceless. Those are my students in this group of beautiful, beautiful kids. And this group is so important because they are in the minority, and oftentimes people do not understand them, and they don't take the time to understand them. And I know that for many people, learning about the LGBTQ community is new. It's super new. People don't know what pronouns are or what it means to be transgender, and it's all new. And I think sometimes that exhausts people who don't understand or haven't been exposed to that, and I get that. But I'm like looking out and begging people to take the time to try to understand. Because we look at little kids, and when they're 3, 4 years old, we tell them that they can be anything they want to be. But then we do this weird thing and we draw the line at gay, or we draw the line at mental illness or drug abuse. We draw lines, and that's exactly what we aren't supposed to do. That's not what we've been called to do. And so I asked, like, anyone who has questions for me, I'd love to answer them. I'm trying to just speak for my kids, these beautiful kids who come to this group telling me they can't ever come out to their parents because they're so afraid they won't be accepted. And that's wild. That's wild. I didn't grow up like that. I can't imagine that, but the amount of children who come into our classrooms over and over saying that they cannot be who they are, when all they represent is love and awesomeness and silliness and joy like every other kid. They come into our rooms telling us that they cannot be who they are. And that's really painful. And I think the church is a really hard place for my kids. It's a really hard place. And we've promised it as a hospital and a safe space for everyone, and it is not. So I read this question on here, like, how safe do you feel? And I feel safe at church. I love Jesus. I feel so safe. But I haven't had to go through what a lot of my kids that are part of the LGBTQ community have had to go through. And I don't think they feel safe at church at all. And I don't mean to speak for all of them or to generalize, but just knowing my kids, I think that's super true. So I think having this panel discussion and doing things like this is huge. It's huge for our community, and it's okay if you don't understand it right away. I have to be corrected all the time. I'm forever learning from my kids. I make so many mistakes. So I'm here to say it's okay that we maybe don't understand, or we don't know, or we haven't met someone. There will always be that. But to just take an opportunity to think, what can I do for these kids? And if all I can do is listen and have an open heart, then that's enough for them. They're not asking for much. So that's me just speaking for my kids. Yeah.
You can see why I comfortably pass the baton over to Lauren. She does an amazing job, and this group has just exploded like this year. I mean, how many do you guys have in there now? Like
30 to 40. And last year it was like 6. And I was so unprepared for that. It was wonderful.
now it's like, boom. So hello, I'm Allison Lalby, and I'm a teacher at Farmington High School. I teach AP Psychology and U.S. History, coach cross country, and also I lead our international and trips for our students and adults as well. So I just have a few things I would love to talk about. First is just in AP Psychology, we do teach gender identification and sexual orientation. And we do have a big panel come up and talk to the students of LGBT plus students who kind of give their experiences, and it's always a really like meaningful presentation. So just to kind of do some educating, because I guess that's what I do, gender identification is what gender you identify as. So do I identify as female, do I identify as male, or do I not identify as either? And that's completely okay too. And then sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. So am I attracted to a male, am I attracted to female, or do I not see gender? I'm just attracted to a personality? And to kind of show some of the complexities of that, if you talk to somebody who's transgender, and let's just use the example of female to male transgender, that means they were born as a female with female body parts, but in their mind, in their brains, they view themselves as a male. Well, that person can be attracted to, so if that person, the female to male transgender person, if they're attracted to females, they're actually considered to be heterosexual. If that same person is attracted to males, they're actually considered to be homosexual. So that just shows you some of the complexities that are out there and why it can be very confusing. And if we study the brains of somebody who is LGBT on a brain scan, it looks different than somebody who's heterosexual. So the differences lie like in the brain. And so neuroscience is really exposing a lot of these things to us. And it's also important to note that the timing can be different. So somebody who's LGBT plus might figure this out when they're 3, if they're a transgender child, but they may not figure it out till their puberty, and that's okay too, or they may not even figure out till they're an adult. So the timetable is fluid, and that's completely okay. And there's also a spectrum. And so a spectrum is like, if you are, let's just say, transgender, for example, it could be that for a while, you may even be unsure of what you are, and that's called the questioning period, and that's completely okay too. There's no judgment, and it's okay to kind of change your mind, and that's okay. And so like there's just a lot of like education that needs to go around with this, because sometimes people who are transgender, for example, they may want to completely transition, but there's other people who may not, and either one of those are okay. And they might it's good to practice like changing your name, seeing if you're comfortable with that. And so there's this transitional period that people go through. And so it's important just to note all of these idiosyncrasies, because it's all okay and none of it should be judged in any way. And we see a lot of these students who are in these transitional periods. And so that's an important note to make. So I'm going to transition to more of a personal side. So I have many LGBT plus friends. I have a child who's LGBT, and I would say, going through that as a parent and as somebody who loves your friends is also like a significant thing in life, and as and it changes constantly, and you have many battles trying to protect your children and your friends, through this. And I'm going to shift now to, I guess, the church, like, and Lauren kind of touched on this. This idea, I guess the church to me, like I was raised a Christian and I went to church every Sunday and I love the church. But going through this struggle with my child and seeing my friends and working with the students at the high school, I have a really hard struggle with the church right now. Because the church is telling our kids, the church is our number one enemy almost to our LGBT students. And as a Christian, I'm like, what? This is so wrong. Like, how can the church, which has supported me and is supposed to represent unconditional love, how can that be our number one enemy to these kids? And these children, our students are, their parents are using the church as rationalization to kick them out of the house and to deny them as their own children. And these are things that we deal with on a daily basis with these kids. We have these kids contemplating suicide, and it's like, how can people say that this is a choice? Like, this is a brain difference. And so it's super frustrating seeing the church reject people, especially with the most vulnerable. And then we saw this switch a couple years ago because I was bothered by this and I wanted to bring, people in to talk to my kids. I had a pastor in the community say, not here, say, well, I can say that, I can come and talk, but I will say that being LGBT is a sin. And then they were like, but everybody sins, so, it's a sin. And I was like, you will not look at my children, I will not allow you into my classroom, and you will not call these children a sin. And, and that's the super frustrating kind of part that we're dealing with the battle of these two institutions. And so I think as a church, to switch from thinking it as a sin and thinking of it as people, and I tell the kids, I'm like, God created you with purpose. You were meant to be this way, and you're not a mistake, and you're definitely not a sin. And if you've read the Bible at all, you would, the things that people are saying is exactly the opposite of what should be being preached about being LGBT. And so, I'm definitely struggling with it. I haven't gone to church in a long time. And I don't have a struggle with God. I don't have a struggle with Jesus. I don't have a struggle with the Bible, but I have a struggle with the institution. And so I guess that was like why I wanted to come and talk about it, because we have a long ways to go. And just know that for our group, like right now, the church is a really scary place to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And thank you for bringing up that part about the church. That's why we're doing this, because we want people to feel welcome in our church. And I know a few years ago, well, one of the things our family very strongly felt, I was raised Catholic and my husband didn't really practice, and we really felt it important we wanted to find a church where LGBT and everyone was accepted. And I remember singing outside one Sunday in the summer, and we had a baptism for 2 dads and their baby. And I cried through the whole thing, because I was like, this is why we're here. This is one of the reasons. So thank you for bringing that up. I want to open this up to questions for any of our panelists, if you have anything specific, or if our panelists have anything that they want to add now that we've kind of gone through, if something came to your mind or whatever, we can kind of go from here. So are there any questions out here? I'm going to rephrase that really quickly just for the video. I think the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you can't identify somebody just by looking, is there a way to ask? Is that kind of what you're saying? Or is there a way to ask or a way to approach the person to get an idea of what their background is?
I guess a better way to identify somebody that doesn't maybe harm them in a way.
Okay, thank you.
I have, sorry, I'll jump in. I sort of read, I read an article on this, and it's kind of, it makes me laugh. But I guess to answer that, if you were to have a white friend, would you say this is my white friend, John? Because I wouldn't. I would say this, you know, or describing the person across the room, you know, to say that's the person that I came with, or that's my best friend. That person in the red shirt, or that person in the white shirt, or whatever. I mean, that's how I would rather be described than that short brown girl over there. You know, I know it's easier to say that than to, but for me, and I know it's not common. It's really not. But that ideally, that would be my answer. Did you want to?
Yeah, thank you. I love that question. That's a question I get asked a lot. Like I said, please bring me the questions. I'm gonna answer your question and that's a sincere question. So let me go back to just using me as an African American. Now, I'm gonna date myself. I was living when Martin Luther King was living, so I've been around for a while. I've been through the civil rights struggle. I've been through the early parts of Jim Crow. So I've seen racism right in my face. So I got a lot of knowledge in that area, what you're talking about. But let me go back and how the United States looked at things. On my birth certificate, it doesn't have African American, it doesn't have black, it has colored. America changes its demographics with race every about 15 to 20 years and come up with a new name. So to answer your question fairly, if you are confused on someone's race, you can just ask them kindly, how do you identify as your culture? Notice I didn't say how do you identify, because it goes back to that, them over there, okay? But, which is my colleagues, I work with them both. Them over there, listen to my English. But and that's the stuff that we hear with color, those people. Don't play with those people. Well, who's those people? Okay? No. And I was going to get, yeah, thank you, Janice. No. Please call me black. And here's the thing. Now, I'm more personable, but I'm not the guru of all black people. I'm just giving you an insight to what it is and a generality. So let me go back to that question that you see it. When you see me, what do you see? Uh-huh. What do you see? Well, I see a black man. That's exactly what I want to hear. Because when you say you don't see me as a color, you're telling me you don't see me as a person. Please remember that. Acknowledge a person's color. And if you're confused about it, just ask them politely, how do you identify? Because we have something like 41 different nationalities in that school, that high school. We have blended families. We have students from all over the world who identify that way. And sometimes I'm very confused. And I'll look at them and I go, well, you look Spanish in my mind. But if I ask that, will I offend them? So I always come around to you, how do you identify and what culture do you identify? And they'll tell you. So great question. When that's one of the things when I'm talking to classes, especially, when you see me, what do you see? And I'm like, oh man, I see a teacher. What do you see? And then I do this. Right. Okay. And it's just a general thing. And it's just a commonality for folks because they don't want to step on your toes and they don't want to offend you. But I found that most people want to be recognized for who they are and what color they are. They're proud of who they are. Okay.
First of all, thanks all of you for being part of this. My name is Peter Elliott. And my question is, a big concern I have is in hearing all of you is that this is an issue that needs to be brought forth And we have a very small group here tonight, and I'm happy we have a group here tonight. But I'm looking for some suggestions, if you can give us any, on how we can move this forward within our congregation, and what we as a congregation could do to maybe reach outside of our congregation into our community to try to help with educating on all three of these topics, because they're all very important. Thank you.
That's our $1 million question. Thank you, Peter. I'm going to take notes if you don't mind.
I do have an answer to your question as well, but I'm gonna be polite and let the ladies answer their first. I think you had a two-part question, if I'm not mistaken. 3 parts. Everybody at the table. Yeah. Okay, a multi-prong approach. Let me put it like that. Did you guys want to say anything before I chime in?
I would add that I think recording it is a good idea, like we're doing, because I think sometimes when we're talking about certain issues, especially mental health, you could be afraid to come into a room with people that you don't know, or into a place that you want to get help, but you maybe don't want other people to know that. So I think it's important to do that and to provide resources in multiple places instead of just one, so that people know where to get help and to know that there's support.
I also think too, if you're trying to reach a lot more people, I mean, people are coming to Mass on Sunday. That's where we get people, right? And so acknowledging that you had this panel and that you're starting these conversations when everyone's here for Mass, and being willing to get kind of uncomfortable and say, why don't we even just have small group over coffee? See who shows up, and start there and just start talking to the masses. But I've learned that even in super like educational moments, it's really hard to get through to people until they know someone personally who's going through something that we're talking about, right? And so I one time went to this talk. I promise it'll just take me 1 minute. I one time went to this talk about Islamophobia, and they gave all these statistics on how after 9/11, we were like, America was so afraid of terrorist attacks, and they were so afraid of Muslims in particular. And they gave these statistics about how you're more likely to die by a piano falling on you than you are a terrorist attack, right? Like all these statistics of how unrealistic that is. But the whole thing was, it doesn't matter what statistics we tell you unless you know a Muslim. Nothing's going to get across to you until you personally experience and know someone who's going through these things, who's experiencing them for themselves. So I think the biggest way to reach more people is to bring in more people, be accepting of more people, and be willing to have the conversations with lots of people and just get uncomfortable. It's so fun.
And like having, it's really interesting how the LGBT plus community will notice a flag or a sticker, or like if they come in and they just see like representation of, you know, like them, like that goes a really long ways with them. So like in our classroom, you know, just having that stuff up, they in seconds will, okay, it's safe here. Like, so it's, sometimes it's just those little things too, like that, just having a flag up or a sticker or something like that.
I want to build on that because being a parent, well, and a person, and with a child of color who goes to the high school, those signs also can make her feel unsafe. I can't remember what, the masks with the Confederate flag on them, they make my child feel very uncomfortable. But yet they're allowed in the school. So things like that, yes, I mean, it's great. You can feel safe or you can feel unsafe. So you have to really, you know, acknowledge what you're portraying to other people, and even what you wear, how that's gonna make someone feel, you know, by what you display. And, you know, you wanna be welcoming, then, you know, yeah, let's display more welcoming signs and accepting, and, you know, maybe it's something completely innocent, and, you know, someone could say that person makes me feel uncomfortable because of what they have on, or what they're wearing, or how they're portraying themselves. So yeah. Your turn.
Thank you. I was taking my notes because I wanted to make sure I covered my points. I'm a little jovial in a sense too, but on a serious note, I want to talk about how we get more people into the congregation of church. I too was raised in church. I love me some Lord, let me say it that way. It is the reason why I do what I do. I'm just ministering in a different way with young people. But let me talk about the issues at hand for primarily people of color. And we have many nationalities in the community or the city of Farmington. I deal with their children every day. And so I hear that what I call the undercurrent of racism. In our country, in the fibers of it, is what I call institutionalized racism. It's embedded into every piece of our country, in the government, in the church groups, in education. I can go on and on and on. But you ask yourself, where did it start from? How do we come to this point when this country is only about 237 years old? Where did this come from? How did this institutionalized racism come about? Well, it came about through slavery 401 years ago. And we never settled this issue, if you think about it. Given the George Floyd piece, it has reignited this country. I've seen some goodness in people with that particular movement. But going back to the point on how we can go on and attract and bring people in, people have to be safe in their environments and feel safe. People of color have already been marginalized for that period of time. I told you 401 years. I still get marginalized today, even though I'm well educated, served my country for 22 years. But what people see that don't understand race that well is my skin color. And you know, and it's painful. But I use my education to rise above what I've endured for most of my life. Imagine waking up every day of your life, and before you get out of bed, you just got to put on your armor. Because you don't know which way the world is going to react towards you based on you being a black male. Now let me go back and tell you a little bit about a history about myself real quickly. I have never been arrested in my years of living. I've served my country honorably. I'm an educator for over 16 years. And still, I go through this. So if I'm going through this, can you imagine what our black and brown students are going through? Okay? And we ask them to learn everything in school. I'm trying to give you some parallels and tying the dots together. To attract people of color to your church groups and to the community, first of all, you have to have someone that looks like them. Like opposites attract. Every time I walk into a store, subconsciously, I'm thinking, will I get arrested? Will I get blamed for stealing? How many cameras are pointed to me? That is just common nature, and why should I feel that way? I'm just giving you an insight. Because a lot of times we don't know that until somebody tells you that. Do I hold anger and hostility and animosity to people? No. But I'm going to give you as much knowledge as I got so you can understand it, okay? So we're looking at that. We're looking at like opposites attract, as I said before. Rainbow Coalition. What I mean by Rainbow Coalition is that we need a plethora, a cross-section of the community sitting on these panels. Okay? This is great work. I wouldn't have missed it in, even if Dave's was throwing a barbecue sale, or something like that. I'm thinking Dave's barbecue in the top of my mind. But it's important to get a cross-section. We got some very, very, what I call very sensitive topics sitting at this table. And people are less likely to come out of their comfort zones. It takes courage to step out on a limb and hear your stories. It takes courage. And to do that, for me, every time I talk about it, it gets me stronger. Okay? But also my belief in God. So we look at that. We have those issues as well as, in our schools as well. How do we get our families of color to visit and frequent the places that we need them to be? And for racism, we can unlearn what we learn. And I ask students when I'm talking to them, where does racism come from? I'm going to ask every one of you, what does racism actually come from? How does a kid that's born into this world develop racism? Say that again. Who's teaching it? Fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? I remember I had a student that said to me one time, Ms. Williams, I don't want to be a racist like my parents are. That blew me away. So when I hear these things, however painful it is that these young people are our future. They, for a lack of sense, don't see color the way that most older people do. Their world is different. I cannot live back in the times in which I live and bring it forward. I have to understand them and where they are at the present time. Given this device right here, it is dangerous. Okay. I'm old-fashioned. I like just good old conversation. Let's just talk about it so I can see your emotions and your feelings. But not nowadays. It's all on here. And then hurtful things are sent. And the next thing you know, I got 2 or 3 students sitting in tears in my office saying somebody called them a name about their race. My question is, when will it stop? And what we're going to do about it as an individual. Everybody's on a different spectrum. You just got to ask yourself where you are on it. Some people at the low end, some people at the middle, some people at 3/4. But you got, like I said before, what you learned about race or racism, you can unlearn it. And now lastly, let me say this. I ask students all the time, can you define race for me? What is race? I'm going to ask the audience, do they know the answer to that question? What is race? Anybody know? I got some bright minds out there, I know. It's some out there. Let me help you. Race is a man-made term. It's what we call a social construct. Something that's made up to fit a color. You can't touch, see, or feel race. What you see from a person is their color. but that's not race. See how we confuse it? It's a social construct, man-made. So how we get back into the thing, the original question, I like to go full circle, is that we make things conducive to people so they can feel invited and feel themselves. Okay? Oh, sound like a sermon up here, didn't it? Okay. I'm sorry, Pastor. I thought about it, though. I thought about it. It's up there, still up there. I'm waiting on the calling. I'm waiting on that calling. He's going to let me know. I may be joining you.
So I guess the question is, how do we reach out to the LGBT community and let them know that they're welcome here, and encourage other churches to do the same? Right. Right. We can only do what our church can do. How do we let people know that we want them here, we welcome them, that we don't? How do we change the attitude of the LGBT? Okay. Okay. And then, yes, and how do we, what are some things we can do for the people who maybe aren't as accepting?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Okay, so, yeah, I'll cover. Right. I would have to say that for my family, Farmington has been amazing. So, as a whole, like as a community, my child has been very well loved and supported in this community, and so I feel super blessed by that. He hasn't really, he hasn't faced any like major obstacles from the community at large. In fact, he gets a lot of support. Although again, it's like, yeah, it's more difficult because he's always aware of, like, as a nation, where kind of Christians stand for LGBT. And so it keeps, I would say, our whole family has been going to church for so long, and I would say that very issue has turned a lot of us off to church. And so I think you probably could tell from, I'm like, well, Ron, like I felt like I was like all of a sudden I felt this anger, and I was just like, I don't know, like I feel like I don't want to go to church. Like they don't accept my family and the people I love and the students I work with, and I can just read the Bible and it feels like a lot more pure in some ways, so I guess for me, that's a journey I'm actually going to I actually live in Minneapolis now, so that's a journey I'm going to try to look into, my personal journey myself, because I do strongly believe in the church. Like, I think it's a wonderful institution, and it does very good things until it doesn't, right? Until it does really bad things. And so, I don't know, I think having maybe pastors come and talk with GSA, like that would be, I always would filter, I just couldn't find like somebody who would not say that it was a sin. Like it was just like, I was too protective, right? Like I was like, you're not coming in and talking to them unless you say that God loves you and you were made with purpose, and then then okay, you can come in. But yeah, so I would say, Janice, like it's a huge, huge challenge as a society. I would say exactly what Lauren said. You need to get out and meet people that make you a little uncomfortable because they're not just like you. And that's, Ron talks about that a lot. And then you invite them in, right? Like that's the big Christian message, is like you invite people to church and make them feel comfortable, and I think that that's maybe the way, I think if you look at it in a macro sense, it feels overwhelming. If you look at it in an individual sense, like, hey, I'm just going to invite this person that doesn't look like me or doesn't, believe in the things, the same way maybe I do, or just, just get to know different people, join different clubs that, maybe other people are part of, and stuff like that. I think maybe, it feels overwhelming if you try to change the world, but if you try to change your own little part, then it feels much more manageable.
So, a question I would have then, if as a church, or we wanted to try to invite a broader spectrum of people into our congregation or into partnerships with us, is there a way for us, and I particularly, talking to you, Ron, with the communities of color, how do we, what are the mistakes we could make? Because I don't want it to feel like we want you to be the token black representative. You know what I mean? I want this to be a genuine invitation to people in a way that would be truly inviting and not minimizing them in any way.
Love that question. That's just got like 15 answers in my head at one time. What you're asking is to have them to come in and not force or feel forced to come in. If I'm not mistaken, that's one part of your question. I go back to the very beginning. How do we get them into the church? Okay. And so let me give you a comparison. I ask myself, how do we get minority families into the school who teach their children? And I was just brainstorming. I was like, maybe I can write a letter. Maybe I can do a TV commercial. I don't know where I was going with it. But what I found is that I came to this one conclusion. Since you were not going to come to me, I was going to go to you. I went to them. I met them on their terms. And how I did that was I said, okay, if you can't meet me, let me give you three options. First option, we can meet in school. I'm talking about bringing black and brown students into the school who already don't want to come. So how do we get them in there? So I'm like, well, you can come to school. Well, no, I don't want to do that. Well, we can meet for dinner. Food is always a common denominator. I call it breaking bread. You cannot identify with that. I have to go back to you again. Breaking bread. There's many chairs at my table. You just need to pull one up and we can break bread. I like that analogy. Look at this table. If we pull people up and have intelligent conversations, agree to disagree and then agree. Okay? But I reached out and gave them the option, and what I found out is that sometimes I'll go to their homes. Now given COVID-19, we got a mask on and I'm fully vaccinated. I'm okay, But I have to respect where people's boundaries are. And so this one particular family wanted me to meet me at McDonald's right over here. And we met at McDonald's. But it was a game changer. So what my answer going back is that people, trust is earned, it's not given. Especially when it's been broken and treated unfairly and marginalized in the communities. People don't want, they're less likely to come up and be open and say, hey, I'm gonna come on over. So we have to really be creative in how we attract these individuals. But in my mind, nothing is impossible if you show love first. Love is a very powerful word, and I'm not afraid to throw it out. You know, Jesus Christ believed in it as well. So I use whatever tactics I can to get them in. But by me being a minority, like opposites attract, so they'll come. And so I'll say this to you, Pastor, as well. I won't be, opposed to sitting down later on with the church group and coming up with a plan that we can go on and get that done. Okay? We can be creative and get it done. Okay? I'm sure that there are a lot of, and then you also have to think about it as this point. When I'm talking to minority families and their children, I often ask this question: how do you identify as with your religion? Now, being a history teacher, I know all these particular religions. So, and a lot of them will say I'm Buddhist or I'm Muslim and I'm this, that, and the other. And so I have to be mindful of their religion as well, because there may be a conflict in there. But I think that we can bridge those divides by just being people, and saying we're interested in a better community in which we live, and use that as the bread breaker. Yes, ma'am. What I meant to say is like opposites attract. So if I misspoke, I apologize. You're right. When I first came to Farmington, I'm used to all that Southern Baptist church when you throw your hand up in the air and I come in, I'm here. Well, we're going to turn page 323 in the gospel. I said, what? No, yeah, I'm comical. I was like, where's the singing? That's not like mine. But what I did was I wound up joining the church right off of 35, right across from Kentucky Fried Chicken. Can't get the name of it right now. Oh, Celebration. Matter of fact, I'm still a member of 2 churches. And so I went over, I'm like, and what I found was the church was delightful. The people were just awesome. I felt at home. Even though the music was, it was okay. But I found myself singing the gospel just like they were. And what I'm getting at is this, is that when people feel connected to, regardless of your color, God is a loving God. He doesn't love you because you look a certain way. He is God. And so when you come in a church and that congregation is wrapping their arms around you and making you feel special along with the word, you're going to come back again and again and again. I came to that church when I first came here for 2.5 straight years, every Sunday. Wouldn't miss it. So, Janice, to go back to your point, it's about how the congregation makes them feel as individuals.
Can I add on to that? So I was also raised in the Catholic Church, and to be honest, I stopped going because I was a senior in high school and I was pregnant, and that was a sin. And I've never been back to the Catholic Church, even though I was brought up. My husband at the time and I, we got married Lutheran, so we decided to join Farmington Lutheran, and it's been great. I went to larger churches like you have. It was similar to Celebration, and yeah, it was great. But you were completely anonymous. Nobody knew your name. They never said, hey, Terry, what's up? How's your daughter? How's your dog? Whatever, Nobody said that. So when I came here, when Maddie was, when we were getting her baptized and things, it was great because people knew me, people knew my name. I saw neighbors from years ago. I saw, my daughter's old daycare mom, I mean, it's all about community, and it is, I feel like it's about, like you said, it's about being comfortable, and it's about how the congregation embraces you. And I've never felt uncomfortable here, not once. But for me, I didn't want to feel anonymous. I didn't want to go to a church where nobody cared if I was there or not. I wanted to be someplace where they knew me and they cared if I was there, and like, my daughter has made so many friends, and she's, done lots of things, been very active in the church, and from the wee singers on up, and it's been wonderful. It's been great watching her, and I'm glad that she does like church and really is very spiritual, and
She talks about this church a lot.
Yeah.
To me. So something's going on good.
Exactly.
Well, I think the first thing you really have to do, and this is really hard, and I'll give you a little example in a minute, but you really have to just ask them how they're doing, and then accept what they're telling you, and just listen. And the example I can give you is, I have 2 sons. There's statistics about everything in the world. And I found out that through, when I'm sitting around 9 months learning all these important things, that when I would have a child, the chance that they would have manic depression, their 17% chance is higher than if I was just a normal guy. So with that said, my youngest son has seasonal affective disorder. Okay, now, it hit him so hard last year that he did not even go to his job to quit. He just couldn't go. It was flat out. Well, so me, having like 40 years in the chair, thinking I knew everything, well, I kept, really, it's just like you badge. You say, what can we do, how can you do, and they have a phone, you text them, pretty soon they don't text back, and you're going, man. So I asked my doctor, and I said, this is really hard, because I said, I know all the answers. All you gotta do is ask me. And, but the thing is that people accept information on their own time. And what you have to do is you have to be around them and give them support and space, because that was the hardest thing for me. So like now, my wife texts my son, but I don't text him about, things about how he's feeling, all that kind of stuff. We just found out that when you bombard somebody with all the information, or you're trying to say, hey, you should go to a doctor. From my school, we have an organization that anybody in my family can go talk to. It's a mental health group that you can just go talk to for free. He just didn't want to do that. And so it's really hard to do that, but what you do have to do is let them know that you really are there and you care for them, and that life is not going to be better if they're not around. And you have to say, are you planning on hurting yourself? And you have to be honest about it. You can't just say, hey, you look good today. I like that color shirt on you, and then don't say nothing, because that's a lot of times what happens. And that's when they just kind of like, float into the abyss and nobody cares about it, and then that's what happens. But there is nothing that you literally can do, and this is what my doctor says, you just can't grab them and do it. Now with me, I was 24, my folks actually got me to go to a doctor, but I thought I was smarter than they were. Once they got me in, I couldn't get out. Well, that doesn't happen nowadays. I mean, it's very hard to do that. You'll hear all the times of where, you know, people are put on a 72-hour hold and then they're let go. They just let them out of the hospital. There's something wrong with them, but no beds, not enough help, insurance, whatever it is. And so you really have to be very secure in yourself and your relationship with that person. And just say, you know, I can't say what you're going through. I just can't. I just don't know. But if you need anything, I'm here to help. And that's really what I found out is about all you can do.
I think also, and I have experience with mental health or mental health issues as well. I think, you know, when we're so used to asking somebody, you know, how are you, or how was work today? And you keep on moving. Like, you know, you expect the good or busy or fine, you know, you don't stop and listen and ask that follow-up question. And I think it's the same with, you know, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm good. But how are you really feeling? You know, that's kind of like, no, I'm really interested. I want to know, how are you? How are you doing? With my daughter, like she said, she had an eating disorder, and I realized that she was depressed, and I walked into her room one day and I said, I've just noticed that you're just not as happy as you used to be. You used to be so happy, and I used to feel like you were so happy, and I know something's wrong. And I don't care if you want to talk about it, but I just want you to know that I've noticed. And that maybe opens the door for conversation, or even opens the door and makes somebody feel more safe with you. Like, it's okay if you're not okay. It's okay to say, I'm not doing good today. And that's where you know, instead of just walking on by like, how's it going? You know, and zoom right by, you know, how are you? How are you really? I think that's just a great question.
And let me piggyback off of what you said. What I find is when I'm dealing with situations, I've dealt with suicide with students as well. I lost 2. And I went back in my mind to what you said. I could have said something earlier to prevent that, and you just don't know what to say and when to say it. So thank you for your candidness earlier on and what you were saying. But before a person will open up to you about something that's that's inside of them, that's personal, most won't. Until, and what has worked for me, because I have to deal with so many layers of hurt, especially with race, with students of color. How do I get you to talk in less than 30 minutes when you're coming in with that wall already around you? And so what I found out is that I make myself a little bit more vulnerable. I let them know that they're in a safe space, first of all, and what you and I talk about is just you and I. And then I give some vulnerability up. We hold close to that. We don't want to look weak when we're trying to help someone. And kids and grown-ups can pick up on that so quick. You know, in other words, they see the facade. And so when I'm doing that what I just spoke about has helped me, I would say 90% of the time. I'll get to what I want to get to help that kid rise above. But I give up some of my vulnerability in the process. And what's a nice, beautiful word for vulnerability is empathy. We need more of that. In all of what this panel has been talking about, that's what I see the one missing trait in a lot of this country is empathy. Just think if we had more empathy from one another, where we would be. I'm sounding a little philosophical, but I'm so sincere. And I use those things. So, yes, to go back to your point, it's just when you open up, you'll be surprised. And a lot of times I'll tell about an experience in me to share with them. Okay?
So,
Can I add one more thing to that? Like you were saying, Terry, that it's important to know, like those cards that I made out there, it's important to know what some of the warning signs are of depression, of suicide. Even as I got that off the NAMI website, I was surprised by some of those things. And so it's important to educate ourselves as, you know, family members, friends, support in the community, to know what some of those signs are and to know how to identify them and what some of the methods are for help.
Okay, well, it's after 8:30, actually. We were gonna stop at 8 and go have cookies, but there's so many amazing conversations going on, I couldn't stop it. And I want these conversations to continue, and I think, I'm so thankful that people came this evening and that people hopefully will be watching this recording. I'm so thankful that you guys joined us, especially Lauren at the last minute. Just hearing those, just how much you love your students, I can absolutely relate, so I appreciate that. We do have cookies and water down in the education wing. As you leave outside on the 2 tables, there are some rainbow stickers that you can display on your water bottles and your cars and your doors and anywhere to let people know that you welcome everyone. There's some bookmarks to talk about stigma of mental health, and there's some little buttons to talk about diversity and inclusiveness. Take piles of stuff and share it with people. There's some down in the education wing with the cookies as well. Thank you. This went so, I can't even say how happy I am with how this went, and I just really appreciate your time and welcome you to come to our church anytime. If you are not currently a member, we will open our arms for you. But thank you. And if you guys are willing to stick around, if anybody else has questions, maybe you could chat individually with people, but maybe we could give them a round of applause.
Thank you. I think I'd share, sorry as I'm stepping over you on this, but in some of our congregation or conversation was talking about congregation, but and Ron, you shared some of this and some of that in offering, but look at that great question of how do we make life better for people? And I think as a congregation, that gift of diversity, Book of Acts, like I said, it's pretty boring if we're all the same. And that's, in our congregation, and I'm a pastor of the whitest, straightest church in the world, I'm afraid. So I want that to be diverse. But beyond that, if a person's atheist, whatever they might be, part of our hope is, how do we make a better world for everybody else? Whether or not they ever darken the doorway of this congregation. And so on that too, if there are ways we can be of, how do we keep this going from here to, how can we all be of help and support and keep learning and growing? And so I'm not saying that very clearly, but I hope the sentiment comes across of how do we keep growing and learning from here.
Reach out to us, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, how can we be of support for you, for the students, for all the folks going through all the different situations that we touched on tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.